Batman Cape Crusader is a new animated series that came out last month, and I haven't seen a lot of people talk about it, so I'm not sure what the mixed bag opinion is going to be online, if people love it or hate it or not, but I just finished watching all of the series for the first time, and I have a lot to say. I thoroughly enjoyed this show for the most part. There's some stuff of the series that I'll get to in a second that I didn't really enjoy, but I just wanted to give my thoughts on this show because I know I'm about a month late to the party when this released last month, but I really just wanted to give my thoughts on the series because I, for the most part, really enjoyed this series, and if someone hasn't seen the series, then I highly recommend watching it because I really enjoyed this series for the most part. Obviously, elephant in the room, let's get this out of the way first. The series is called Batman Cape Crusader. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be like a loose adaptation to like the other Batman animated series in the past, being called Batman the Cape Crusader. I'm not sure. I just went into this with a complete blind perspective. I've seen some of the other Batman animated series before, haven't watched all of them as much as I should have because I know there's a lot of good ones out there, but most of my Batman experience and knowledge just comes from the comics or the DC animated universe, which is hit or miss at times. Starting off, this series is placed in the 1940s, and it's obviously a very much like young Bruce Wayne Batman adaptation in his year one, if I had to guess, and putting Batman back into the past, into the 1940s, is I think one of the smartest things that the series could have done. With the likes of Matt Reeves and J.J. Abrams behind the series, it's no doubt that this series is going to be a hit, and it's going to be a love letter to the fans that love the character of Batman, but I think putting him into the 1940s timeline is something that I haven't seen a lot, other than the movie. I think it was called Batman Gotham by Gaslight or something like that, where a lot of the adaptations nowadays with Batman is he's going to be in the present, and putting him and choosing him to put him into the past is something that I think is very unique and actually grounds the character. Nowadays, Batman is looked upon as a character or superhero that is essentially like a lowercase god, where if he has enough prep time, he can beat and do anything and all this stuff, where putting him into the 1940s narrative, he's just a man. He's flesh and blood, just like the rest of us, and it's very much prominent throughout this series and throughout the 10 episodes that it has, that this is a man who cares about his city, he cares about justice, and he's a detective. Something that this series that I'll give it praise for throughout the whole video, Batman Bruce Wayne is a detective, and that is something that you see throughout the whole series, where he's working with Commissioner Gordon, Barbara Gordon, all these different characters, where he at the end of the day wants to save his city, but he's not this god, he's not this Iron Man and this brooding force, he's not Ben Affleck's Batman who can take on Superman. This is a guy who gets hit in the back of the head with a 2x4 and gets stunned. He gets knocked out during the finale of the series by getting knocked out with a 2x4. This is a very grounded take on Batman, and I think that's one of the best things that someone who is writing a narrative for Batman can do. We saw that in 2021 or 2022 with The Batman. That is one of the most realistic and grounded aspects of the whole movie, and that's why fans, including myself, love that movie so much. That's why it's my favorite Batman movie. Batman is a man, but he's, especially in this series and some of the more grounded narratives, he's not someone that can go take on the Justice League by himself and all that. We love those adaptations of Batman, but this adaptation in Cape Crusader is a man who is literally wearing pajamas, is what it looks like, and all he wants to do is save his city from all the corruption that there is in Gotham, and I love that narrative. I know in some of my other reviews I've gone through episode by episode reviewing smaller series, and I'm not going to do that in this one. I don't want to spoil some of the aspects that this series does differently compared to other adaptations of the character, but I will say check this out if you haven't, because I will be getting into spoilers, so this is your only spoiler warning for the whole series, even though this series has been out for a month now, so like whatever. But very firstly, one of the things I want to highlight that comes out from episode 1 is Batman. Like I said, he's flesh and blood, he's in pajamas or whatever. He is like a mythic cryptid compared to like what a Mothman or a Bigfoot would be. The people in Gotham in episode 1 and 2, at least in the start of the series, they're not sure if this Batman guy is a real thing, or if he's just a myth made up by the police force to keep criminals from stopping, or to stop criminals from doing these crimes. But then you see throughout the series that like this status of a mythic like cryptid, he rises up and everyone in the city kind of rallies behind him and realizes like, oh no, especially the criminals. So like, this is a real dude, this is a real threat. And I love that aspect of him starting off in year 1, or just maybe throughout his whole career, him being this like mythic cryptid creatures that people are afraid of in the night. And I think that's what the 2021 or 2022 the Batman adaptation did phenomenal at the start of the movie. He is also a cryptid adaptation where they're like, is this guy real? And they're kind of scared to look out at night because there's rumors of this Batman creature, and I don't know, I'm getting off track, but I absolutely love that about this series. Another thing I loved about this series is the murder mystery aspect. Episode 2 and a lot of other like subplots during this series is it's a lot of murder mystery detective work, which makes me want to say, going back to what I just mentioned earlier about Batman being a detective in this series, he is a detective at heart, but this show isn't like a Batman superhero show where he's taking down his rogues galleries. Yeah, there's members of his rogues galleries in this series, but to my knowledge and to the way I watched this show and enjoyed it, is this is a very much grounded murder mystery, crime-ridden Gotham set in the 1940s, which helps with the pacing and the narrative of Batman being just a man in a suit who's not this over-the-top, complicated superhero who has all these gadgets. It's just a murder mystery show in the 1940s with Batman as the main character, and oh my gosh, I love that. This show does a really good job of grounding the universe and fleshing out all of their characters. If you were to ask any comic book fan of at least Batman who Harvey Dent is, you're gonna say Two-Face. That's his natural progression of being Two-Face. And something I have beef with and I don't like about different adaptations of like the Spider-Man TV shows or whatever superhero adaptation that it's known in the past that this certain character is gonna evolve to be this, like with Doc Ock in the 2017 Spider-Man TV show. You know eventually Otto Octavius is gonna become this Doc Ock type of character. We know that Harvey Dent eventually is going to be a corrupt politician that's going to go down the path of becoming Two-Face. But you can't rush that. You can't have Harvey become Two-Face in episode 2 or 3 of the series without it not feeling earned. And that's something that happens in this series is Harvey Dent from episode 1, I have in my notes of episode 1, you see how Harvey's flipping the coin. He's doing his stereotypical corrupt DA stuff. And then that way in episode 9 or 10, when Harvey becomes Two-Face, that payoff actually feels earned. Because Harvey is someone that you see in the series that has his own arc, and so when it finally culminates and becomes him working with the corrupt, like behind the scenes crime of Gotham to finally becoming the DA that gets the acid thrown in his face and then he just loses his mind and becomes a lunatic criminal, it feels earned. Whereas in other adaptations like in the Dark Knight movie, I don't feel like that was really earned of him becoming the cynical villain. That being said, every character from Alfred to Commissioner Gordon to Harley Quinn to Barbara Gordon, even like Flask and Bullock, which are these two corrupt cops that you see throughout the series, that they're just doing everything they can just to do what works best for them and how they can benefit from it. Every character throughout this series, even though it's like a micro series at this point with only 10 episodes, every character is fleshed out and they have their own arc. Not all arcs are huge. The Penguin is in episode 1. She has an arc for why she's doing what she's doing, but not every character in this series has a huge arc, but it feels like every important character at least has some sort of natural progression. And in my mind, I just look at that as a love letter from Matt Reeves and J.J. Abrams and the rest of the team behind this, that they care about these characters. And I think if you're going to do a series where you have a multi-character cast, if they're all one note and one dimension, you can't really have any sort of natural progression or benefit of having such an ensemble of a cast. If it's just a Batman TV series that only works with Batman, who cares about the rest of the characters in the series if you're not putting some sort of progression with the arcs of the characters? And you'd be surprised, like, wow, Cody, that's a very groundbreaking, nuanced take of you. No, it's not. That's a very by-the-books basic on how you should run a movie or a TV series, but you'd be surprised on some of the series that I've watched where they don't do that with an ensemble cast of characters. Another big thing to take away from this series is when you have a character like Batman, which is one of the oldest superheroes of all time, he obviously has one of arguably the best rogues gallery. Here in 2024 in the modern day, how are you going to adapt his rogue gallery in the story of Batman and making it interesting? Like I said, everyone knows Harvey Dent eventually becomes Two-Face. Everyone knows that the Joker is one of Batman's biggest villains. How are you going to adapt these characters in a new way that is interesting to audiences that are fans of the character? In my opinion, 9 times out of 10, if you have an existing IP like Star Wars, Spider-Man, or Batman, let's say, and you're going to make a new adaptation, whether it's a movie or a TV series, how are you going to garner the interest of the existing fans without changing some sort of the narrative involving the pre-existing characters? If you have your pre-existing characters, and for this example, the Rogues Gallery of Batman's villains, and you have them be very one-dimensional, and then do the exact same thing that we know that their character arc progression naturally goes towards, it's not going to be interesting. It'll be interesting for people that aren't fans of the characters, but for the people like me and the people that are going to be watching a TV series about Batman, we already know where these characters are going to go. So I saw online when I was doing a little bit of research for how people interpreted this show, people like Barbara Gordon and Commissioner Gordon, they're African-American, they're black. I saw a lot of just racist people in general. Oh, Commissioner Gordon, the Gordons, they're supposed to be white. Who cares, dude? Penguin is now a girl. I see a lot of people being like, why is the Penguin a girl? One, this is not a real person. This is a made-up character. Also, who cares? It's a made-up character, and this is a different adaptation, a different take on them. Who cares? I'm not going to get into like a whole lot of spoilers and talk about every different change they've done in this series, but there's quite few, to my knowledge, changes to specific characters based on what they usually are in their comic counterparts or other adaptations, and the only thing I have to say about that is that I love it. I love when you have people like pre-existing IPs like Spider-Man or Batman that have had so much on screen, whether on the big screen or the small screen, different adaptations of the character, you have to change the way that specific characters interact and what they do and their progression with their arcs, or even just different interpretations or adaptations of those characters. Because if you don't do that, where we're at in 2024, it's going to be so cut and dry and boring. You have to have some sort of narrative change. Now, I'm not saying to make a Batman a murderer and to have him use a gun. He actually uses a gun at the end of this series, which is one of the negatives that I didn't like. He didn't kill anyone with it, but he did shoot a gun at a guy and purposely missed just to scare him, and like, whatever. But that being said, you're not going to have your core ideologies and your core like character traits of a character that's like the main character. You're not going to have Batman just start murdering people, or else like, yeah, that's a huge like waste of the character of the adaptation, because that's not something we know Batman's core quality trait to be. But someone like Harley Quinn, if she's becoming a therapist to talk to Bruce Wayne like she does in this series, that's awesome. In this show, she's a therapist, and she uses her patients to like brainwash them for them to do their own bidding. To my knowledge, Harley Quinn doesn't really do that. That seems more of like a Riddler thing, where he like gets into people's minds and has them do their own bidding for them. But that's a different interpretation of Harley Quinn, and there's a teaser for Joker at the very end of this series, like in a post-credit scene. But so far, throughout season 1 and all of Harley Quinn's arc, there's no Joker. I love that. I know I've been rambling about this for a little bit, but last thing I want to say is that there is a lot of different adaptations of characters throughout this series that are different from their original counterparts, and I love that. I think that's a perfect way to make a new series and a new take on characters in the present day. One of the last things I want to say about how much I love this series is everything feels very low stakes. I know I said this was set in 1940s, and I love that as a set piece for Batman in general, him being a flesh and blood person. I know I mentioned that earlier, but the fact that it's in 1940s, there's no one with atomic bombs or these huge like plasma rays that are just, it's going to be end of the world or whatever. There's so many adaptations, and I get you want to have high stakes for your characters, but with a character like Batman that is so driven based on moral obligations, and he couldn't save his parents then, but he could save his city now, and it goes from justice to vengeance to hope, and all this different arcs that Batman normally has, I feel like Batman is a perfect character to have low-stake missions and low-stake problems with. Not in a sense that it's not important to Batman, but the fact that, oh my gosh, Harvey Dent and the mob are the big bads at the end of the series. Are they gonna blow up the world? Are they gonna kill all of Gotham? No, they're a big crime ring that they're trying to break down. There's a lot of adaptations with different superhero content, or just movies in general, where everything, like the Eternals, everything is the end of the world. And of course you have to have your in-game moments where like, yes, this is important, this is the end of the world, but not everything has to be the end of the world, and that is by far the most important thing that I think this show got right and that I love. With a brand new take on a pre-existing character, having a very low-stakes mission is something that I think Batman is the perfect character to do, and I absolutely adore the fact that this show nailed that right on the head. But I've been talking for at least 20 minutes now in this recording about the things that I loved about this series, but I very quickly want to touch on some of the things that I didn't really like in the series, and my explanation for why I think that happened, and then what I want to see in season 2 of the show, crossing my fingers that it's going to get renewed for a season 2. Very quickly, there's only a few things I didn't like, but the number one thing is there's 2 villains in this series that feel very out of place. I know I mentioned earlier in the video how there's specific characters like Dent and Harley Quinn that have natural progressions to their characters, so whenever they become like evil or they snap or whatever, that makes sense because we've watched them become evil. And I think that's great in a series aspect with like TV shows, because a lot of at least superhero TV shows get caught up, like The Flash, in this like villain of the week narrative, and I think that's one of the worst things any superhero TV show can do. It's good to introduce characters like how they do in this series with Clayface, where he's only in for 1 episode, and it's a nice nod to pre-existing villains for Batman that might not be long-term throughout this series. That's really cool. But there's 2 villains in this show. One, again, I know a lot of Batman lore. I don't know all of his characters as well as I know Spider-Man characters, but there's one character in this series that's like a ghost man that is interacting with like the physical realm, and I really thought that was just out of place, because Batman's fighting people like Harley Quinn, the Penguin, Clayface, a mobster, Firefly, all these like down-to-earth, realistic villains you could see in the 1940s like actually take place and make sense, and then out of nowhere, this ghost on a horse comes in and it is like, it's not a hologram, it's not a Mysterio thing, it's an actual real ghost, and introduces this like spiritual realm to this Batman universe. And before you say anything, I know Batman, like with Justice League Dark, he interacts with other spirits and realms, and Batman is the character that does all of that. He was with Scooby-Doo and stuff sometimes, but it just felt very out of place. I know that Batman's done that in the past, so don't jump on my head saying that Batman never does that. But in this series, it felt very out of place. The second character that felt very out of place, in the same vein of Supernatural, there's this character, I forgot her name, she's this young teenage girl that essentially has the power, kind of like a siren, I think, to like suck your soul and stuff. And it just felt very out of place. She was this very strong, like, emotionally ridden teenager, this little girl, that her whole thing is she can like suck the energy from you and kill you. And Batman doesn't kill her, he defeats her, but she doesn't kill her. And it was a nice episode. It was pretty interesting and stuff, with like this girl kidnapping other girls and Batman having to do a lot of detective work, which I liked, but it just felt very out of place with the rest of the villains in the series. We're just like drip feeding in these two supernatural villains. Listen, if in season 2 or 3 and the rest of the series in the future, if they go down that route of introducing more like slowly supernatural stuff, then I'll bite my words, right? I'll say, okay, that makes sense. At least it was introduced in season 1, so if like a big bad spiritual guy pops up in season 2, at least it's known and throughout this universe that like that's existed before. If that happens, who cares? I'll bite my word. But just looking at the progression and where this character is set in this realistic, this could be our world. This could be a real guy in a suit and we're fighting a real crime mob and stuff. Like, everything so far up until those two villains and those two separate episodes felt very down to earth and very grounded. Again, who knows where they're going to go in the future down the supernatural route, but as of right now, season 1 as a whole, those two episodes and those two villains felt way out of character and way out of whack. As far as the things I didn't like in the show, honestly, I'm being honest, those were the only things that I really didn't like. But besides that part of all the supernatural stuff, I really don't have a lot I didn't enjoy about this show. I thought those were done well enough to like not be looked at as like, oh, you have to skip this episode because blah blah blah. I thought those were like, they were solid episodes. They were solid written characters and stuff. The ghost guy actually has a reason for him being evil and coming back and haunting Gotham. But I don't think there's not a whole lot about this series that I didn't like besides what felt it was out of character and out of place with the supernatural aspect of it. That being said, let's get into what I want to see in the future and how I think this show could improve moving forward. The number one thing I have in my notes on how to improve this show is to just have less magical stuff, which again, if they want to choose to double down and go down that route in seasons 2 and 3, hey, I'm not the creative team. Those people obviously know more than I do. They're the ones running the show, not me. But if they want to go down that route, then double down on it. But if it was me and I was in charge of season 2 and stuff, right, I would do kind of what they did in Stranger Things, where she had that one-off episode with all those other weird people, and they just completely scrapped it and never went anywhere with it. So we'll see where they go with this supernatural and magical stuff in the future. Something I want to see in season 2 is a more longer, drawn-out crime drama. One thing I think this show does suffer from, I will say, is when you have a murder mystery in like episode 2. Episode 2 is a very good murder mystery episode. Nothing from that carries over into episode 3. And I know we're in an animated TV show about Batman, right? So like, who am I to judge fully? I'm gonna. Like, that's me. That's not my job. Like, I'm gonna judge. But I think a way to keep audiences, at least me, interested is to have, if you're gonna have a 10 episode season, let's have an underlying murder mystery or an underlying theme or something, some sort of mystery, because this is Batman, he's a detective, all throughout episodes 1 and 10, then slowly unlock different narratives throughout each episode. And then you can sprinkle in different villains and stuff through the episodes as well. But I think this show in season 2, if they were to go the Court of Owls route, and this being in the 1940s, or this being the 1950s, if you want to progress the decades, do whatever you want. But I think if you had, through episodes 1 and 10 of season 2, an underlying narrative of the Court of Owls being this big bad that you're like slowly building up, I think that would be great. And I think that's something this show could benefit, rather than just introducing different heroes of the episode, right? Like different weekly villains. Just have one underlying narrative where one group of villains or one specific villain is the reason for all the stuff happening in episodes 1 through 10, instead of just different villains of the week. I said earlier in the end credit scene how Joker was teased. If I was in charge of season 2, another thing I would want to do is not have Harley and Joker team up immediately. Flesh out their different interpretations and their different adaptations. This Joker seems like a very different take on the Jokers that we got in the past, which again I think is great to change the different narratives and to change the way the different specific characters interact and evolve. Do not have Harley Quinn and Joker immediately team up because they do in the comics, or that's what those two do. I think maybe having them like be rivalries for a little bit would be really fun, and then have them come together as like a Sinister Six, like common ground, team up and then defeat Batman. Last thing that I would really want to see them do, again kind of in the same vein of them not teaming up Harley Quinn and Joker yet, don't have Barbara Gordon become Batgirl just yet. Maybe have her do that at the end of season 2 or the beginning of season 3 if they're going to keep going down that route. But everyone knows Barbara Gordon in some adaptations becomes Batgirl. Don't do that just yet. She is killing it. She is a very, very good lawyer. She's doing it. She's doing it for the love of the game. She loves what she does. And I think if you just take this character and you're like, well, she normally becomes Batgirl, boom, season 2, she's Batgirl. I don't like that. I don't like that interpretation. I think they need to just continue her doing what she's supposed to do, and then as like a lawyer and stuff. And it shows the contrast in different ideologies between her and the commissioner, her father. And I think that's something that you can do and have Batman be on both sides, being on the side of her father some weeks or some episodes, and have her father be on the side of her on some episodes. I don't think rushing her to be Batgirl is the best avenue for her character, at least where we're at with her character right now in the story. Other than that, that's really all I have. I really enjoyed this series. If you've seen this series, let me know what you think. I haven't seen a lot of discourse involving this series online. I kind of stayed away from it as I was watching the series to not be spoiled about anything, but now that I've like kind of sought out people talking about it, I've either seen people say it's mid or it's okay or just I didn't watch it. So if you've watched this series, it's on Amazon Prime, Amazon Video. If you've watched this series, let me know what your thoughts are below. And if you haven't seen this series, check it out and come back to this video later. Let me know what you think, because I love hearing back from you guys and what your thoughts are. Let me know what you guys' thoughts are on the videos. Did I have a good review? What do you think of this? But if I had to rate this on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give it a solid 8 or 8.5. I really enjoyed this series, besides the few things that I didn't. But that's really all I have for now. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I know it's been a while since I've uploaded. I've been very busy in my personal life, and my computer that I use to record this has not been great, so I've had a lot of technical issues behind the scenes. But thank you guys so much for watching the video and just continuing to support the channel. I love making these videos. If you've made it this far, please consider liking and subscribing. It really helps me know that you guys just enjoy what I'm making, and I'm not just speaking into the internet in some void of no one hearing me. But I'll always be making these videos because I love making these videos. But if you guys like these videos, like the video and subscribe, and let me know what you guys want to see from me in the future. That's really all I have for now. Thank you guys so much for watching again. Take care. Bye.